Now let's jump back to the editor and take a look at things that were a little bit more difficult to see in the file comparison tool. So here we have our edit link. That's one change. As we scroll down here, we have our add form and then our username that we're passing into the add form. And now this is all new here. So first of all, what we're doing is creating a row variable that's identical to what we would pull out of a database, except with everything being initialized with an empty string. This is so that later on in the form, we can use it in this ternary operator to represent an empty string, or if we pull out an entry from the database for an edit form, we can use the actual row there. If we didn't specify this first, in the ternary operator for an add form, we'd end up throwing an error. And then after we initialize that row variable, we're going to set the default action here to add. Now we change this down here to edit if we have a username that gets passed in. And this action is actually passed as part of the form. So if we scroll down to the bottom of the form here, we'll see a hidden input here at the end. Its name is action and its value is going to be action. So this is how we determine on the processing side whether this is going to be a submission for an update or a submission for a new entry. I'm going to scroll back up here. Now in this next line, what we're doing is creating a username input. Remember how for our add form, we do have a username input, but for our edit form, we don't because we don't want the user to change their own username. So here, what we're doing is creating that input. We're using the same code that we did from our previous example in order to populate this input if the user has submitted the form already. In this next line, we're setting a variable called edit text, and we're initializing it with an empty variable. And you see here, if we do have a username, we're going to set the edit text to you're currently editing and then the name of the user, and we'll wrap this in strong and paragraph tags. Now this is just to remind the user that we're editing an existing record instead of creating a new one. And you see this edit text being used here at the very top of the form. Now again, this will be empty if it's an add form. Okay, and in this next line, we have submit text, and we're setting this to add entry. And this gets modified here to say save changes, and then we use the submit text, if we scroll down, as the submit input text. So this is what the button will say at the bottom of the form to submit it. It will say either save changes or add entry. So if we do pass a username, we want to pull out the data into the row variable that we initialized up here. And so the query we're going to use here is select all, we're using the asterisk, from the people table, where username equals, and then we're going to grab the username from this parameter here. Now just to make sure we're using MySQL real escape string, just in case something gets through into this function. And next we're going to pull that row into the row variable by using MySQL fetch array and passing it result. Everything else we already covered. These 4 items here are overrides of existing variables that we set here. So we already talked about the modifications here. We're using ternary operators, but instead of using an empty string as one of the options, we're using row variables, in this case row name, in this case row birth year, and so on. We have the username input here, which if it's an add form, will be a full input that the user can see and manipulate. But if it's an edit form, what it will be is a hidden input called username. It will pass the value of username, which again we got from a get variable, into it. So this is definitely a place where this script can use an improvement in the future because it's possible to spoof an input. So the user could potentially use a different username here. But for now, we're going to pass this username as a hidden input through the form so we can use it in the processing. And then all of this gets returned here.